It's that time. Are you ready? All right. This one is a commission. We've got someone sitting here and watching this, and it's a piece for them. So what they want is this, but they want it with the colors different. So this has pinks and oranges and golds on it, and they want violets and blues as the little color accents. It's got some little filaments of color running through there, and some little tiny bits that are red, yellow, and orange, but they come out looking dark, kind of chocolatey. It's got a 2-stage foot on the bottom. So we're going to do this in those colors. Got everything laid out.
Put in a little bit of pink, remember?
I talked to her.
She said no?
No, we got it worked out. So, my blowpipe was already warm. The glass won't stick to cold metal, so you have to pre-warm the pipe. But the pipe was sitting up in the pipe rack for quite a while, which means it may have debris on it, and I dunked it in water to take off any debris was on there, and then gave it another shot of heat. The reason you want to take any little deposits off is because if there are deposits on there, when you take the 2200 degree glass from the furnace and cover them, they're going to turn into gases and swell up as bubbles on the tip of the pipe, and that will then bleed out into the body of the piece. There were none on this. That's a good first gather, and I'm applying a little bit of white glass to that. The white is in the form of frit, F-R-I-T. We have glass in the form of rods and bars. We have lots of different frit, lots of colors, and the frits come in all sorts of particle sizes, everything from powder up to pretty large chunks. This is it's above the scale of powder, but it's still small enough particles that you get almost complete coverage with it. But it's a very thin layer, so this will be a very pale, thin wash of white in the background of the piece. The next layer out, I'm going to add some larger particles of white, the same white, but bigger particle size. That'll give us more density where the chips are, but more spaces in between the chips. So it'll be more like snowflakes. When you see that piece in different lights, the white looks different because you get these glowy open spaces showing through. If we wanted a pure uniform white, we'd take a chunk out of a bar, crack it off, heat it up, and roll it back over the outside of the clear layer, and then you have an entire layer of solid white. When Chris and I started blowing glass back in the 70s, that's the 1570s, of course, when we started blowing glass, you couldn't buy frit. It wasn't available. It didn't become available until we were several years in to glass making. And when it first became available, I didn't want to use it because it felt like because the way you saw it used was basically to make blobs of color. Just a quick application that made blobs of color on objects without any art merit to it at all. So it seems to me at the time to be a kind of a cheap trick. And only when we started to figure out things that we could do with it that took it beyond that did we start using it. And we use it a lot now, and we especially use it in demonstrations because it's a much faster method of applying color than doing overlays with the solid color. So I just rolled through little chips of 3 different violets, 2 different blues, the violets in 2 different particle sizes, the blues just in 1 size. I just added the little filaments of a yellow-orange glass. They won't look orange in the piece. And also in this pile that I rolled through were little bits of red, yellow, and orange, but they won't look red, yellow, or orange in the piece either, because the yellow and orange bits are made with cadmium and selenium as their colorants. The cadmium and selenium interacts with the fluorine and lead in the white glass, and it gives you different grays and blacks. So you get a chemical interaction. Often when you put glass pigments together, they don't react like putting paint together. It's not like mixing watercolors. You have chemical responses that happen that give you colors that you might not expect at all. So if I took, I have to let this cool now. If I took this red and this white and I mixed them together in a furnace, they would not produce a pink, which is what you would expect with paint. They would make black glass. Because of the chemical interaction, again, between the selenium that makes that red and the fluorine and the lead in the white glass. Another difference between the two is that the red is very stiff glass. That's because it's made in a soda lime base, because it can't have the lead in it and still be that red. So it's in a soda lime glass base. That means it's inherently less fluid than the white glass is. And that's true on the piece too, and that's something we have to cope with when we're making objects, is that the colors can have very different textures to them. And when you start to stretch and expand a piece, areas that are stiffer are going to move less than areas that are softer. So blowing pieces, for instance, if you try to blow, if you tried to do a piece that was red and white stripes, the white glass would stretch more than the red. So you'd have to take that into account in applying the color and make the white threads or white rods or white chips be much smaller when they were applied, if you wanted them to come out the same size once the piece was stretched and blown. I don't know if that actually made sense, my explanation there. I could say it again in 3 different ways, but I'll not do that. All right, so we have all the glass we need to make the cone of the vase or vase now. The glass, when it is coming out of the furnace, is around 2,200 degrees. While we're working, we have to keep it at above 1,200. If any of this drops down under that 1,200 mark, somewhere around there, somewhere a little under there, the shrinkage of the exterior over the interior will cause enough tension that it will break the glass. So if you let it cool too much while you're working, it spontaneously fractures. And that's called thermal shock. Thermal shock is something that you deal with at home. If you've ever broken a piece of glass by taking it up or down in temperature too rapidly, that's thermal shock. The pieces that we make are all a combination of soda lime glass and lead glass. Both of those glasses are susceptible to thermal shock. Borosilicate glass like Pyrex is less susceptible. It's not immune from breaking from temperature change, but it's less susceptible than lead glass or soda lime glass. But you cannot, no glass blower has access to large quantities of borosilicate glass in different colors to go in a furnace, or on the scale that you would use in objects like this. We can't melt a furnace full of clear borosilicate glass in this equipment because it's a higher temperature glass and we couldn't even get hot enough. And no one does that. So you can't get, the point of that is, you couldn't make this vase in borosilicate glass. It can't be done yet. In 20 years, I think it will be a possibility. But not yet. So I'm just trying to work toward scale and shape right now. I'm going to reinforce the jack mark. I put an indentation just off the tip of the pipe a little earlier. That mark has stretched out a little and become more like a rounded trough than a crisp mark. I'm going to crisp it back up. That mark tells the piece where to break loose later, and that's going to become the rim of the base of the vase. Still need to make it a little longer and then make it more conical. Making it longer will start to move it toward that because I'm going to move only the lower 6 inches or so this time, and that'll stretch it a little bit toward the cone form. That I'm using didn't exist during the Renaissance, and this is another tool that when we started blowing glass, people didn't use it. It didn't exist, as far as we know, as a blowing tool at that point in time. And it's a luxury to be able to use it because it changes shape to the shape of your hand. Very expensive tool. We go through one of them a day, and it is called wet newspaper. Which, you would think that people would have come up with a flexible material as a shaping tool before, but they didn't. It wasn't an intuitive kind of thing. So all the shaping tools historically were rigid. They were metal tools, wooden tools. That didn't flex. A form like this, the metal blades of the jack are actually the ideal tool. And you might notice that I actually came pretty close on the length right there. It's going to get a little shorter because I have to flatten the lower end. It'll get a little shorter on the top when I flare the rim open. So it'll end up being just about the same size as the cone portion of that piece over there. I'm going to bring the bottom up a little bit. This one is going to be just a little wider, a little fuller in the body. Than that one. To the foot. The foot is going to go on in 2 stages. First stage will have color on the underside of the clear glass. I've got that color laid out here. has small versions of the same color that's in the sidewall in it. I didn't land right on center on that one. That's okay because I'm going to squeeze it and move that glass around. It's a little oval right now. I broke in a new pad right before the demonstration. I'm going to break the pad in because if you go directly onto the very hot glass, the newspaper will combust to the point where you get bits of it sticking into the glass body. So I pre-burned it. Prior to people having access to the paper as a shaping tool for something like a foot, we would have used a tool called a clapper. Two pieces of wood that are hinged together with a notch cut in them. The notch would fit around the body of the object. The two layers would fit top and bottom over the foot to squeeze it and shape it. Second stage of the foot, you don't need a lot more glass, even though it's going to be wider, because when you set down on it, it's going to squish out. So that'll give us a clear ring around the color. Asking me technical questions. Do we want a full punty or a step down punty? A full punty would be one that was 3/4 of an inch wide at the tip. A step down is a 3/4 inch height with a 1/2 inch tip. She said, do you want me to get it right away when you come out, or do you want me to wait and have a heat to settle the temperatures and even things out? And I said, wait. So this heat we're going for the punty. We're going to make the transfer off the blowpipe onto that rod. We were working on a large-footed piece yesterday, more complex in color than this one. It had 3 rolled overlays. It was struck in an optic mold. It had, so it made a rib in pleated pattern of color. And it had a more complex foot to it. And we reached this point of the piece. We cracked loose onto the punty rod, took it back to the heat of the glory hole, and it exploded in the glory hole. So I'm telling you that because 50 years in, 47 years in, you still fail a lot. And this one, there's every opportunity for this to fail. It's not a given thing at all. So off onto the punty when glass students would first come in, students that were going to major in glass and study it and get a degree in glass or get a graduate degree in glass. The very first day I would tell them, this is the slowest material that you can pick to be expressive with. It takes longer to reach a point where you can be expressive with hot glass than it does with any of the other craft or art materials. So if that's your goal, you might want to think twice about whether this is the material that you want to be working in, because you might get 4 or 5 years in and realize that you've made so little progress that it's not worth going forward. And the reason I tell you that is because the parallel I would draw is that learning to make glass is the equivalent of learning to play violin. And you can learn on different levels, you can aspire to different levels of ability, but when someone starts playing violin, no one wants to listen to them. Not even their mother wants to hear them. No one can hit a good note when they start playing violin. The equivalent of that would be if I walked you all through here. You've seen me take a rod and get a gather of glass from the furnace. If I handed each of you a rod and said, get some glass out of the furnace on the rod and take it to the bench and shape it into just any symmetrical form at all, none of you would be able to do that. Not one of you would be able to do that first time out. One, when the furnace opened up, half of you would say, I'm not getting close to that thing. I won't put my hands up near there. And then the rest of you you can't see where the glass is when you go into the furnace. You have to know where the glass is. So you wouldn't know what depth to go to, you wouldn't know what angle to run at, you wouldn't know how to hold your hands. The glass would get on there, you wouldn't know how you had to turn to keep it on there, so most of it would drool off. A bunch of you would hit the openings of the door going in or out. Very slow learning curve. We just brought the top end of the cone open. We've been getting really good at this lately. We brought that open really nicely and cleaned up the sidewall right away. I'm going to take one more pass at this. It looks like it flares just a little bit to me, and I'm going to squeeze it back in and get just a little closer to it actually being conical. Was there making sure it was flat at the same time as I was making it round. The foot and the rim are parallel. That's really important. Otherwise the piece will sit crooked when it sits on the shelf. That last heat is to take the memory of it having been touched with tools off of it to equalize everything. That's the finished piece right there. When you're all done, you have to get them off the punty rod, and we get broken more pieces in our career doing this than any other aspect. When you're trying to remove it from the punty, it has to be in the coldest state that it can be in without breaking, because it has to be self-supporting. Then you have to break it loose. When you wrap on this rod, the attachment has to be the weakest part of the glass. And so that was good. So you don't know know until right at that moment whether you're going to keep it or not. So every time you do that, that's like a kick. It's like, oh yes, got another one. Okay. But it has to now slow cool. From 1,000 degrees down, the oven is running at 960. From that temperature down, the glass has to shrink on the most exposed part at the same time as it shrinks at the core of the thickest area. That means it has to all be the same temperature. You have to bring it down a couple degrees, let it set to the same temperature, bring it down a couple degrees, let it set. They've had to do that for over 5,000 years. People have been slow cooling glass. It's essential. It means it'll be relaxed when it comes out. We won't see it until tomorrow. If you want to see it, be back next weekend. If you don't want to wait that long. Oh, and you have to beat her because it's her piece. So you have to get here before she does if you want to see it. Anyway, if you want to see other stuff we've done, that's us back there. Chris and I are the only glass makers back there. Take a look at that. If you have questions, stay and ask. Otherwise, go away.